This is from Fanbyte. This is a tank tier list. We already went over the DPS, but now we're gonna go over the tanks. I purposely have not seen this. I've had it up in my other tab and I have not seen this. This is the farthest I've scrolled down right here. Our Final Fantasy tank tier list is here to help you decide which of the vitally important jobs is right for you. Tanking has been a complex role since A Realm Reborn after all. Players have often shied away from it as too complex or too much responsibility. Some of those folks are right. There isn't a lot of margin for error when your teammates take more damage than you by default. Wait, what? I'm probably misunderstanding that. You often need any little edge you can get. The good news is that, at least up to Final Fantasy XIV, this role is in great shape. Despite choosing your favorite, we just had to, the margin between Dark Knight, Warrior, Paladin, and Gunbreaker are all fairly slim. You straight up cannot go wrong with any of them. Yes, this is true. This is very true. But hopefully this tier list will help you give a sense of what works best for you. Whether you're a first-time tank or looking to change up the familiar role, it's time to give these beefy buds a look. Okay, Gunbreaker. S tank? S? The Gunbreaker is the newest and arguably best tank in 14 right now. The job is effective all-rounder, dishing great damage. Oh, there it is right there. There it is. Okay, this is already biased. Alongside super solid defensive abilities and even some healing and barriers. That's a stretch. Healing and barriers, dude. Okay, it basically borrows a little bit from every role in the game. As such, you always have something to do, keeping the job fun and active. Meanwhile, the jack of all trades element makes Gunbreaker the jack of all trades element. Man, they really like Aurora, and they really like Brutal Shell Shield. Okay, if there's a downside to playing Gunbreaker at the moment, it's only that the job gets a little complicated around level 70. It has so many offensive options, in addition to the usual beefy of tank abilities, that it can be hard to keep track. So many offensive options, but they're not options though. It's just you use them in a buff window. You never think to yourself, man, I got a lot of options. I can use this outside of my buff window. I can use this inside of my buff window. I guess that's the only option. Most of these flow pretty naturally. You perform your basic attack combos to charge up more powerful ones, then you weave between the stronger attacks while making sure you keep your cooldowns, particularly those that do damage over time and effect. Fluid or not, that's a lot of buttons for tanks to... Fluid or not? Okay, this is a high responsibility role where positioning, gauging enmity, and recognizing enemy attacks are key. Tanks often need to move around as much as melee DPS, usually with the added pressure of getting the party killed if they don't. If you can do that and watch all your cooldowns, your overall damage will go down, nullifying one of the great advantages of this job. Yeah, I bet you what they did, they took one look at FF logs and they saw the Gunbreaker was like slightly the highest and they were like, yep, this is the best job. Your low cartridge limit really hurts the Gunbreaker here. What? In Shadowbringers, the job can only charge 2? Yeah, but it's for damage. It's not for defense of this special resource at time. You always have an easy option to expend it, but if you forget that or lose your tempo while... Okay, you have no overhead to accumulate resources. Forgetting to burn a cartridge just... You only expend like one burst... What? But the sheer number of options is too difficult to ignore. Gunbreaker is the easiest fucking tank. You just hit everything on cooldown. You use like one burst strike out of no mercy. That's like it. Yeah, that's like it. I think maybe 2. I don't even think about it. But the sheer number of options is too difficult to ignore. Barriers, healing, great damage, satisfying effects, and the ever-present cool factor all make Gunbreaker the best tank to play right now, though it's somewhat slim margin that could easily change in a single patch. The best thing about this is right here. Every tank is good. This entire review is absolutely atrocious. Sorry, I'm more critical of tanks than I am melee DPS because I main this role. Like, literally everything in here is fucking wrong. Like, what the fuck, dude? Are you kidding me? Like, healing and barriers, dude. Okay, I can tell you this. Fucking Gunbreaker doesn't have any healing and doesn't have any barriers. Aurora is good because it's free, but a lot of times it's just fucking placebo, man. No one pops Aurora on and is just like, oh man, that's so much healing, dude. I don't even have to heal anymore because of Aurora. No one fucking does that. That doesn't happen. Brutal Shell is like barely a barrier. Barely. Do you know the fucking potency on a Brutal Shell barrier? Brutal Shell is a barrier like Physic on Summoner is a heal. Yeah, that's not a bad comparison. All right, anyway, so Paladin's S tier. Or, oh my, what? I mean, Gunbreaker's S tier. Paladin's only A? The Paladin in particular saw wonderful reconstruction with Shadowbringers. This is a tank player's tank, focused almost exclusively on defensive abilities and group play. Okay. Under ideal circumstances, the tanks are mostly pretty similar in this regard, but your active moment-to-moment gameplay is more concerned with What? Your active moment-to-moment gameplay is more concerned with defensive skills, whereas most Paladin DPS comes from damage over time effects and a passive buff? Wait. Passive buff? What? I'm gonna be honest here. Does anyone have any fucking clue what the passive buff is? Let me ask you guys a question. How many people felt stupid typing out block? Because I felt stupid reading block. I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. Wait, no, Paladin DPS. No, they're talking about a DPS. No, it can't be block. They say Paladin DPS comes from a damage over time effects and a passive buff, a passive DPS buff. What's the passive DPS buff? There is no auto attack buff, but sort of, it's not a passive buff though. Okay, anyway, it's burst damage, comes from casting Wreck, an offensive and healing buff that allows you to spam juicy spells if cast when your mana points are high enough. The numbers are good, the satisfaction is not. Spamming Holy Spirit and Holy Circle just feels weak somehow? Okay, that's weird. Though this is something Square Enix hopes to address in Endwalker by granting flashier spells to a lot of classes. The long and short of it is that Paladin feels genuinely unique, but slightly dull in solo play. Slightly dull in solo play? It's like the only tank that can like literally cast a heal on itself. I would argue that Paladin feels amazing in solo play. In group content, it has absolutely game-changing abilities. There's cover as an... Okay, this allows you to tank all damage meant for an ally. There's also passage of arms. Dude, this is a bad example for a game change. An ability that is very niche and rarely happens. Like, I mean, yeah, it does. When it does happen, it can be really clutch, but the amount of times that it happens, I don't think is worth mentioning. An absolutely game change. This creates a cone of damage reduction, while Paladin itself takes less damage thanks to the 100% block rate, playing into the flavor of their mighty shields. High-level players can exploit all of this to the full, whereas newbies get a very reliable, easy to pick up and play tank to cut their teeth on instead. You just need to know where and when to deploy both playstyles. What? I want to know what this passive buff is. All right, Dark Knight. Woo! B tier. Dark Knight is the true pick up and play tank. I mean, aren't they kind of all? The flashy, edgy Warrior of Darkness only has 1 damage combo for single targets, plus a 2-hit combo for groups, like everyone else. Most of the rest of their damage comes passively. I don't think they know what the word passively means. A couple high mana cost nukes provide 30 seconds of bonus damage per cast, whereas 2 similar high damage attacks can be woven into your attacks whenever you reach 50 black blood. This is the job resource secured mostly through your damage combos. The level 80 Dark Knight skill is also damage oriented, though it is passive by its very nature. It summons a sort of shadow clone. Wait, most of the rest of their damage comes passively? They think that most of your damage comes from your shadow clone? Fight by your side for several seconds. I feel like several, they could have worded this better here. I feel like several means like 7 or 10. It lasts longer than that. Anyway, it's a unique ability among tanks, but doesn't require much thought once it's cast, and actually takes a while to activate. The summoning animation is just awfully long. It got dinged because the summoning animation is awfully long. But it doesn't matter if it's long or not. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's just a dot. That's all it is a dot. I wish you could turn the shadow off. They didn't say that about the automaton queen. Oh, you're right. You're right, actually. Yeah. Together, though, these give Dark Knight a decent mix of burst and sustained damage. It's the best of both worlds. You use your shadow in your burst. It's the best of both worlds between Warrior and Paladin. Speaking of which, the Blackest Night is an incredible alternative to... What? You're comparing the Blackest Night to cover? They're not even close to being the same ability. It has a shorter duration and doesn't offer the same 100% protection for friends, but it's much more versatile. In many ways, it's the signature skill for Dark Knights. The Blackest Night is a semi-spammable protective barrier that can be cast on any friendly player, including yourself. It grants a 7-second barrier for 25% of the target's max health. If the barrier is destroyed during that time, say from a Tank Buster ability, you get a free cast of your damage buffing nuke abilities. It's defense and offense all in one, assuming you time it right. Ooh. Timing is truly key on Dark Knight. In fact, because they hemorrhage mana and don't self-sustain as well as other tanks. Okay, self-sustain, I'm going to assume they mean HP, which is correct. The Blackest Night also almost makes them feel like a barrier tank in the way scholars are barrier healers. You'll need to rely on it and defensive cooldown abilities more aggressively than, say, Paladin, which can just heal itself with Clements. Okay, that's it. We're done here. I don't even want to know what they gave Warrior. I'm gonna guess. Let me guess. A B. I bet they gave Warrior a B. Oh, look at that. They did. They gave Warrior a B. Okay. On the exact opposite side of Paladin is... What? Really? I always thought the opposite of a Paladin was a Dark Knight. I don't know. Anyway, you know what? That doesn't matter. On the exact opposite of Paladin is Warrior. The 14 tank fills a role we see across various jobs in the game. That of the greedy, damage-obsessed berserker. Greedy? This is expressed by big burst damage and self-healing caused by draining hit points out of the enemies. Just like Machinists, Black Mage, and Samurai, however, a warrior needs to polish their timing? Missing high damage windows kind of makes their whole identity meaningless instead. Are they trying to say that all of your damage comes from a burst window and that timing it is important? You know, I'm not gonna lie. I have never really thought Warrior was comparable to Black Mage, Samurai, or Machinist. I've never really thought about it before. Anyway, the sense of unstoppable greed further manifests in Holmgang. Every tank has such a skill, one that makes them immortal for several seconds on cooldown. It does nothing for a party besides keeping you up and soaking hit. But at the end of the day, that's a tank's whole job, and Warrior does it more often than anyone else. So let me get this straight. Warrior is the greed tank because of Holmgang, but Dark Knight is not the greed tank because of Living Dead. Who wrote this fucking article? You're fired. Holmgang has the shortest cooldown of all the immortality skills and none of the drawbacks. Gunbreaker Super Bull Light effectively damages them, reducing them to 1 hit point. Paladin's Hollow Ground halts damage altogether. It has the longest cooldown of the bunch. Dark Knight's Living Dead is just strange. It requires a Dark Knight to effectively die before its duration ends. Then healers must restore the tank by the equivalent of their max HP. Otherwise, they die anyway. It leans into the barrier tank thing, sure, but it's got nothing on Holmgang. Okay, even this guy knows how bad. Wait a minute. Why are you gonna say that Holmgang is greed when you obviously are aware of how Living Dead is? Did you proofread this shit? Did you run this by anybody? If you just like to chop and keep on chopping without fear of death, he could have totally left this out. Warrior is a great tank, especially since so many players value fast completion time in pickup groups. What? The big numbers lean into the job's singular identity well, too, but this identity doesn't provide the same clutch moment as a Paladin, nor the ever-ending stream of activity as Gunbreaker, which also does big numbers, just more slowly over time. Okay, so Warrior is B tier because Holmgang is greedy and Inner Release is hard to use. And it's because it doesn't have as many off GCDs as Gunbreaker. And it doesn't have cover. Almost half the Warrior section is literally just comparing the invulns. Why would you talk about how bad Dark Knight's Living Dead is in the Warrior section? Shouldn't that be in the Dark Knight section? Why do you put a section into Shadow Clone when you could have put the section into Living Dead? Dark Knight is a B+ because the summoning animation on the clone is awfully long. They hemorrhage mana, you have to time your attacks, and because TBN is more versatile than cover. So Gunbreaker is S tier because it deals a lot of damage and it has healing and barriers. It deals a lot of damage and it's a jack of all trades. So that's what makes Gunbreaker an S tier. Paladin is A tier because it's dull in solo play because of its passive DPS buff. And I think that's it.